Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the Badgers, and we do so on a regular basis with Tyler Hunt from SB Nation's Bucky's Fifth Quarter. So please join him and the rest of the staff there covering Wisconsin football, basketball, and athletics overall. Looking at the 2020 Wisconsin schedule, I'm glad to see we've got a marquee matchup against a big non-conference foe, or two, actually, depending on your perspective, as Wisconsin played BYU back-to-back home and away a couple years ago. Really void of a big matchup this past season. The other oddity I see here, Tyler, is opening in Big Ten play against Indiana on a Friday. Interesting, a matchup against the Hoosiers at Camp Randall Stadium to open the 2020 campaign.
Yeah, that one's going to be a little odd. Obviously, we've seen it in the past. 2 years ago, Northwestern and Purdue opening Friday night open the Big Ten play. It's a little weird, but it's the first time Wisconsin's going to have to do it. They have opened on Friday a couple other times in some non-con games, but it's going to be odd to open it, in conference on a Friday. It's going to be interesting to note, and that's just kind of what the Ben's looking to do to get push and ratings and things of that nature. I know in a few more years, I believe Wisconsin opens with Penn State to start the season, and I don't know if that's a Friday or Saturday, but that's years down the road. So that's going to be an interesting one, and especially against the team. It's not like a Rutgers or a Maryland that struggle. Indiana is kind of developed and had a pretty solid season, so it'll be interesting to watch that opening game. But Camp Randall at night is pretty special, and you don't get a lot of those, so it should be a lot of fun.
I had not heard about the Penn State scheduling. It sounds like the Big Ten wants to make a big splash on opening weekend with a Friday night game between two of its powerhouses. The other thing that I always look for in analyzing a Big Ten schedule, so for a Western Division team, who do you have to play out of the East? No Ohio State, no Michigan State, no Penn State. You do have Michigan, you've got Maryland and Indiana, so a pretty favorable run there out of the Big Ten Eastern Division. Also, a very difficult three-game stretch starting at the end of September with Michigan on the road, Notre Dame, so that's the marquee matchup, of course, in Lambeau Field, much like Wisconsin played a few years ago against LSU, and then back home to take on Minnesota, which is usually, of course, reserved for the final weekend of the season.
Yeah, it's really a wonky schedule, and it doesn't get any easier when your non-conference opponent, that week we're heading to Michigan is Appalachian State. They're no slouch in that group of five. Obviously teams like that can lose a lot of players, and obviously they lost Zach Thomas and Eli Drakewitz, their head coach. So you don't know who they're going to be, but Michigan knows them very well as being an upset-minded program. And then the next week you've got to go to the Big House, and the week after that go to Lambeau to take on a Notre Dame team, which, we talk models of consistency. Notre Dame and Wisconsin are right up there. And then, of course, you rival the week after that back at home in Minnesota. So it's a little bit of a wonky schedule when you mix in, you lose a traditional game at Lambeau, and then you lose a traditional road game because you actually play Northwestern is at Wrigley Field this year. So really a wonky schedule for the Badgers, but should be fun. I'm going to go to catch both the Lambeau and the Wrigley one, so it'll be different, cool. But it'll be exciting. Yeah,
very cool, very cool. Yeah, Appalachian State is no joke. They lost one game this year. They've won the Sun Belt 4 consecutive seasons. They beat North Carolina and South Carolina this year out of the SEC and the ACC. No joke there. So, yeah, I should not focus on the three after that. I should include App State in that 4-game run of App State, Michigan on the road, Notre Dame, and Minnesota, with the Notre Dame game again at Lambeau Field. And the other oddity to me, I started to hit on this, was Minnesota early in the season. And what has been the rivalry game is, of course, Wisconsin-Minnesota to close out the season. And then they've matched up. The Big Ten has Iowa and Nebraska as a rivalry game on the final Friday of this season after Thanksgiving. Now they're switching things up with Wisconsin and Iowa, a game that could obviously very much factor into the Big Ten Western Division Championship on the last day of the season.
Yeah, it's a little weird, Obviously, we've kind of gotten used to Minnesota being that last weekend, but up until a few years ago, that wasn't always the case. So it's interesting to know it, and obviously this Iowa rivalry, to Wisconsin fans, is just as important as the Minnesota one. To have at least one of those in the final weekend will be exciting, but I believe down the road, and a couple years it goes back to Minnesota. on that final week. So it's a lot of change around, but that 2020 season for Wisconsin is really going to be schedule-wise defined is kind of wonky because there's some different things and some weird things and weird locations, but it should be a fun one just given that it's a little bit of a switch up to the standard 3 games against cupcakes and work into Big Ten play. It's Big Ten play and it's excitement right out of the gate, so it'll be a lot of fun.
So despite the absence of Ohio State on the schedule, I would say you take the non-conference into account. It's an upgrade in scheduling for Wisconsin with the difficult 4-game run that we talked about in September. And if they can navigate that, the back half is very manageable with the Marylands, Illinois, Northwestern, Purdue, and Nebraska before the huge matchup at Iowa. Tyler Hunt on the line from Bucky's Fifth Quarter. Please join him and the rest of the staff there at SB Nation. Tyler, we appreciate you stopping by.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mark.